Hi everybody. I wanted to do something a little bit different today for the channel, and that is go over some technical hardware stuff that I've recently been working on, and some ways that you can use older, cheaper hardware to augment your streaming, not streaming setup, your sample server setup. So if you watch Junkie XL's videos, you know that he did a video where he talked about these Dell R610 servers and how cheap they are and what the performance per dollar is for buying them, etc., etc. I decided to buy a couple and set them up. I've got one of the two set up right now, and the second one should be up pretty soon. So I wanted to do a video kind of going over some of the stuff that I ran into, some problems that I ran into, some questions that I had to answer for myself, so that hopefully when someone else maybe is doing this, there's a resource for them to explain some of the in-depth stuff. So these are the servers, and I'll put the link in, down below as to where you find them. It's from this server seller on eBay. What these are old servers. The processors in these servers, I believe, are somewhere. I can't tell if it's. I've seen dates as late as 2011, 2012, but I'm pretty sure this exact model processor is from 2010. So this is almost a 10-year-old processor. Now, there's a disadvantage there. This is not the newest, highest-end processor that you can buy. This is significantly slower than probably what's even in like an iPad Pro right now. So that's the bad news. The good news is that it doesn't seem to matter. It doesn't seem to be the limiting factor on your contact instances or your Play instances or your Spitfire instances, for example. It seems to not really matter. There are a lot of people rocking this exact Xeon processor in, say, their main production DAW right now. So these have aged pretty well, and I'm sure when they were released, they were, probably $2,000 per processor. As you can see, they're down pretty far. So this is a seller on eBay who sells refurbished servers. So these were probably used in large data centers or corporations, most likely for virtualization, so they could run multiple virtual machines in them. We're not going to use them that way. We're going to use them in a different way. And so I just wanted to kind of go over what these are, what you can get them, what you can get in them, and how to use them. So before we take a look at this, let's look at the configuration. So right now this is set to have two 250 gig Samsung SSDs. Let's get rid of that for just a second. Let's not include the rapid rails. We'll talk about what that is later. And let's just say, how much does it cost to buy a machine that has two hexa-core X5760s and 96 gigabytes of DDR3 memory? It costs $620.10 to buy these, okay? If you go try to configure a dual-core server on Dell's website, Puget Systems, anything like that, and you try to configure a dual-core Xeon machine, you are lucky to walk out the door for under $5,000. These are $620. So, significant savings. Let's talk about the real price, though, because as you can see, I have not put drives in this. So, what I did when I bought these is I actually bought these with 4 1 terabyte SATA drives, and I included the rapid rails so that I could mount them in a rack and have them easily come out and be serviceable. A little more expensive, $900. Again, consider the fact that to walk out the door with a modern, Xeon machine with 96 gig RAM, you will not walk out the door for under $5,000. Probably not under $6,000. It's going to be closer to $10,000. So in terms of price, it's kind of hard to beat this. Now, the reason why these are so low in price is A, they're, as I mentioned before, they're older. B, you have to configure them yourself. So we're going to go over some stuff, how I configured them, and what they did. Right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut to a video that I recorded down in my mechanical room of my home, where these are currently residing, and I'm going to show some of the hardware, what this is, what they look like, how they come You know, what condition are they in? How noisy are they? Where are you going to want to put these? And then we'll come back and we'll talk about software stuff in just a second. All right, so this is my actual hardware setup. As you can see, it's incredibly professional with this ridiculous series of spaghetti wires. This is sort of a work in progress. As you can see, I'm still waiting for my rack to come in. So the Dell R610 is a server, okay? So things to remember about servers. They are loud, one. They are large, one. So this is about how big it is compared with my hand for scale. Sorry, I'm just my own camera person this morning, so I don't really have a chance to be on the video, but this a human hand is about this big. Inside, what you have, you've got this little latch right here. Allows you to open it up. Inside the server, what you've got are a series of fans along here that cool the server. So the air runs mostly from the front here to the back. In the front, this is the drive bays, and this is the back plane here where the drives connect. The way I've got this guy set up is, as you can see, it's got this little thing that's telling me that I opened up the, open it up. It's got these drive bays, okay? These are ones that I bought with it because I wanted the enterprise drives that are came with it. The any 2.5 SATA drive or SAS drive will do. I think with SAS you have to have the SAS drives in these two, and the SATAs here. Over here, what I have are 2.5 inch Samsung 860 EVOs. These are the 2 terabytes, and I've got these two in RAID 0, I believe it is, whatever the fast one is. Set up in RAID 0, these two. I've got the these two are spinning disks. This is the OS set up in RAID 1, so these are mirrored. This is the hot spare for this, so if one of these two dies, it immediately builds the RAID array off these two, or these two. This one I have just set as a data drive. So I ordered drives with it. You don't have to. Probably eventually what I'll do is get rid of this data drive, make this an SSD, get rid of this hot spare, make this an SSD, and do another 4 terabyte striping setup. So this is 2 of them. Excuse me. This is 2 of them, by the way. This is a second unit down here that I have not configured yet. So again, we've got the drive bays, the fans. These 2 large heat sinks are our processors with the banks of memory. It looks like they're 8 gig sticks. They are not ECC from what I can tell, actually, so I had that wrong. I think I initially had seen a BIOS setting that may have confused me. In the back here you have the 2 power supplies. Again, the nice thing about servers is redundant power supplies. So we've got 2 power supplies. If one of them fails, it will automatically fail over to the other one and warn you to replace it. And again, you can get those pretty cheap. Just like every other Dell thing, they pop out without any tools. Very, very easy to replace things in all of these. You don't need any tools. Like I said, the drives pop out. I had to buy some drive caddies because, as you can see, I'm missing some. I'm still waiting for those to come. This is just a placeholder here. So yeah, that is the Dell R610. So it is large and it is noisy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up here, and I'm going to replace the cover. And we're going to do a noise test so you can see just how noisy these are. And you will understand why I have them down here as opposed to in the studio. It's been a long time since I worked on these back in my IT days. We had a couple, I believe, of these exact models, but it's been a long time. I'm not very good with the cover here. Nope, there we go. Cover just snaps right back on. So now that we've replaced the cover, I'm going to turn it on. Power button is right here. So this is the full load. It will spin up the fans to their highest setting. during boot to check them. It's currently doing RAM tests, which on the larger number of RAM, the larger RAM sizes takes a while. So they do take a very long time to turn on. I ordered them with the rapid rails because I'm going to put a rack here so that we can have these racked. Again, right now they're just kind of sitting on this piece of IKEA furniture while we get everything set up. So on the back, they have 4 interfaces. Obviously, you're only going to need one. I just have those going into a gigabit switch here, which then goes into the house wiring there. This is the router I use. This is a pretty overkill for what I use it for, but I always try to provision resources. So this is a pretty high-end router. You do not need one that is quite this beefy. I highly recommend having your own router. This is the router that comes, obviously I use Comcast around here as our only option. The router in this is probably not very good because they're cheapo consumer stuff. This guy's a much better, much more enterprise grade. I think it does 2 million packets per second. Edge router. I like Ubiquiti because they're pretty cheap enterprise grade stuff. So that's sort of an overview of the hardware. Let's go take a look at how I have them configured and what your software setup is going to look like. All right, so we're back upstairs and we're going to talk a little bit about the way that I have these set up for software. So I've got them configured on remote desktop. So I'm going to open up a remote desktop session to that server we had open down there. Let me move this. Oh, I'm sorry, I need to make Safari small. Let's open up this remote desktop session. So I talk about this on the latest Composing Made Simple podcast, but if you don't listen to that, A, you should, and B, let's talk a little bit about Vienna. So Vienna is software that is made by Vienna, and what it is when you install it, the idea is that you install it on 2 machines. So you install it on, say, your main DAW where you're working, and you install it on a separate machine. That's the server that we were talking about. I actually have more than one server, and I have one server over here that's not even a server unit per se. It doesn't have that form factor. It's not that long rack-mountable enterprise-grade hardware stuff. This is just a regular old Windows 10 PC over here that also runs it, which I can open up. This is that one I call Puccini. I name them all after composers because I'm pretentious. And as you can see, I've got it set up. Same idea. It's just a Windows 10 system. So the way that Vienna works is I can say load logic on, and what you're looking at right now in the screen is my main sort of DAW machine. Let's just open a blank template here, and let's add a software instrument. And when you install Vienna, it installs 2 things. It installs a standalone server program, and it also installs a VST. So here's the VST. The VST looks like this, and right now it just says not connected. And if I try to play, nothing happens. What you do is you can go over here and you can create an instance over here. And now that I've done that, I can say connect. And because these are on the same local network, it uses broadcast, so they do need to be on the same local gigabit network. You can see that there something just showed up on Hovannes, which is the machine that we were looking at down in my mechanical room. So we connect up to it. And what I can do is, oop, that's Puccini. What I can do is, where's Hovannes? There it is we can insert, say, a contact instance, and let's just load something easy. We'll just load an instance of outputs analog strings here. Let me just close this other remote session here, and it should be loading up here. Okay, so nope. So now we got analog strings loaded, and what happens is, because we're connected to this instance, we can actually have this instance of analog strings exist on our main DAW machine as if it were being hosted locally, but it's not being hosted locally. It's being hosted on that machine downstairs. So it's not using RAM on this machine, it's not using CPU on this machine, and it's not using disk bandwidth on this machine. So my DAW is has access to all of the computing resources of the local machine without any of them being taken up by the sample. What happens is, when I press a key here, that MIDI event is sent over the network, downstairs to that machine, which then receives it, renders it on the virtual instrument, and then sends the audio back up the network and out this VST that we have loaded here. So it effectively allows you to have as many software instruments as you have hardware. And as you run out of hardware, you can just keep adding Vienna servers and keep hosting them remotely. And so you can have, this is how Hans Zimmer or Junkie or whoever has thousands, 8,000, 10,000 contact or play instruments loaded, is that they are using this software to effectively distribute it across modular computing hardware. Okay? So, things to know about this. One, you will notice that what is running here is regular Windows 10. This is not Windows Server 2016, not Windows Server 2019. This is regular Windows 10 Professional that I am running on the server unit. And the reason that I chose to do that was that if you look at Vienna, and you look on their website, you look at supporting operating systems, Windows 7, 8, 10, Mac OS. They do not support Windows Server. And from what I can tell, and this is just from my research, when I went on to Vienna's forums and searched for Windows Server, is it supported? Does it work? I found people who had some problems with it sometimes. And what would happen is Vienna people would get on to support them and say, I'm sorry, we don't support that. Now, the good news is that these Dells that we're talking about running are super old. And the reason that that's good is that the drivers for all that crazy enterprise grade stuff that's in them, they all exist and they're already built into Windows 10. They're already there. Okay. A lot of times, if you were to buy a new rack mountable server unit from Dell or HP or a boutique manufacturer, a lot of times they're running super high end enterprise grade equipment, and the drivers are not built into regular Windows for that. Sometimes, okay, it's hard. Windows Server will generally have it, but again, Vienna does not support necessarily explicitly Windows Server. So I'm running Windows 10 on this. Now, a couple of things about Windows 10. So I bought the server, and I knew the server does not come with an operating system. It comes with Windows Server Trial Edition, so you can run it for like 10 days before it stops working. So I knew I was going to need to buy an operating system. Excuse me, I have a cold. So I was looking into buying Windows Server for it, and Windows Server is quite expensive. I think the licenses were running like $700, something like that. Pretty expensive, and it's per core. So I think I actually would have had to go up to like $900 to license the other cores, because again, these are dual hexa-core processors. So there's 12 total actual physical cores on the machine. Now it has hyper-threading, so it's actually like 24, but whatever. So it was going to cost a lot of money. So I was thinking about doing that. Then I saw that Vienna didn't really do it, but I also saw that some people were having success running Windows 10, because there are some people who need, say, a high-end graphics card that may not be supported by Windows Server, but it is supported in Windows 10 for gamers. So I decided to try it. So what I did was I went out and I bought a Windows 10 OEM license, which is just a license you can buy for like $200 on Newegg or Amazon or wherever, and insert your favorite, tech site here that sells stuff. I bought it and I tried to install it and it didn't work, and I was a little worried. So what I did was I installed off a USB stick the Windows 10 trial version. You can install Windows. You can just get an image of Windows 10 ISO, plug it into the machine, install it, and it'll say this isn't licensed. It's only going to work for a little bit, but you can at least see if it runs, and it did. It ran fine. I tried installing Vienna. Everything worked. But I could not get my OEM license key to work. So it turns out that the way that Windows 10 licensing works is that if Windows has ever been installed on that hardware before, an OEM license functionally will not work. It will not license it. What you have to do is buy a 8 gig, this is a 32 gig, I think, USB stick, get the Windows 10 ISO, install the trial version, and then use the built-in activation to activate a new copy. You have to buy a new copy. Okay, so do not use an OEM version. The activated copies, the sort of just buying it off the Windows Store, are like I think $50 to $100 more expensive. But it actually works. It will license. So do not buy an OEM copy. It will not activate on this hardware. If anyone needs an OEM copy of Windows 10, I got one. You can buy it off me. I'll give it to you cheap. So that's the first thing that I learned. That's the first mistake that I made, was I bought Windows 10 OEM when I should have just waited, installed, and activated through the Windows interface. Second thing that I learned, all the hardware works, but your Vienna key can actually go inside the server. So I didn't show it. If you saw it open up by sort of, if you think about where I was showing where the drive bays were, just to the left of those is actually an internal USB port, and you can stick your Vienna key there. And that's nice because that cover actually locks. So you can actually lock up your Vienna key inside the machine, which is pretty cool. Again, Vienna works. You do need a license for each machine. They're moving to per machine licensing now, where you can buy one. You used to have to buy, I think, 3. Yeah, it must be 3 because I'm still using my old licenses. You get 3 licenses when you originally buy Vienna Ensemble Pro, so you can run it on, say, your DAW, and then 2 servers. And then for extra servers, you have to buy more licenses. So know that. You will have to have a Vienna key for every piece of hardware that's running Vienna. It just looks like a USB stick. It's not. You have to buy a special one. Just go to Vienna's site. They show you. It's an e-license, or you can get them on Amazon for $30. And yeah, and then you've got it going. And what I found is that this is a little program called Rainmeter. As I'm watching my CPU and RAM usage, I am going to run out of RAM, even at 92 gigs. And I'm going to run out of hard disk bandwidth long before I run out of CPU, even though these CPUs are really old. Because I think Vienna is really well optimized for multi-cores. So having, effectively 24 cores in this machine, 12 physical, double that with Intel's hyper-threading, allows you to, you have lots of cheap cores, basically, instead of, one giant, super powerful, expensive core. So, and again, there's people rocking these processors in their main DAWs right now who are scoring AAA games, AAA Hollywood films, all that stuff. So I'm thinking that this processor is just fine. And again, it comes cheap. So this is a great way to get a lot of performance out of not a lot of money. Okay, so that's the software setup. That's how that works. Now, when I bought the Dell R610, I bought some hard drives. It comes with these spinning enterprise grade 2.5-inch SATA drives. This is one that I took out to put an SSD in. They're just standard 2.5 drives. You do not have to have the enterprise grade ones. I bought them because I wanted to have pretty high reliability, and these are generally a little bit more reliable. Do not run your samples off these drives, okay? Even though these machines, these big servers, can go in massive RAID arrays, like you could put 6 of these in, you could, say, stripe them and get super high performance off of that, okay? Striping is where there's multiple drives, say there's drive 1, drive 2, and it's got to write some data. It writes it to this drive and this drive. It doesn't mirror it, but as say it writes the first half to this drive and the second half to the second drive, and that allows you to basically have 2 drives that are operating at double the speed and double the capacity. So it gives you a lot more capacity and a lot more speed. Now the downside is if one drive dies, you lose all the data on all the drives. Okay, so it's not very reliable, or it's dangerous, quote unquote, to run it like that. The reason you don't want to run spinning disks in RAID for samples is that the limiting disk metric on samples is the seek time. So inside this, there is actually a spinning disk where the stuff is stored, and there's a little arm that is reading the disk. And when you go to, say, play a note, what's happening is it's going to look for the first part of that sample and start streaming it from the disk. And so you're not really exceeding the bandwidth of the SATA interface very quickly, but that initial seek time is where, because you want low latency, right? You want to push a note and you want sound to come out right away, right? Because you want it to feel like you're sitting at a piano or playing a violin right away. That seek time really messes with that. And the one metric on spinning drives that RAID does not improve is seek time, because it's got to go find it on one of the drives, and the drives are 7,200 RPM, or if you're using SAS ones, 10,000 RPM. And that seek time is where it is. The seek time on an SSD, this is just the box for those ones I showed you downstairs. The seek time on an SSD, 0, right? Because there's no moving parts. There's no mechanical portion of the drive to slow down that seek time. The way a SSD works is it's got these little reservoirs basically, and it basically uses high voltage to push an electron up there. It's really hard to push it through the little the sphincter up into the reservoir, and then the electron stays up there. Now, this is why you'll sometimes see people say SSDs wear out, because as you're pushing stuff through into those reservoirs, this is loosening, right? And so eventually, they only have so many writes before they go away. Now, the great news about samples is we're not writing to the sample. We're gonna drag our contact Spitfire libraries or our 8DO output, whatever. We're gonna install those samples one time. We're gonna write, and then the rest of it is all read. When I press this note, there's no writing happening on that disk. Okay, what's happening on the disk is it's just going in there and seeing where the ones and the zeros are. Okay, so the way I have it set up is that I have two 2 terabyte SSDs striped in the sort of the right side of that server unit, and so I'm getting 4 terabytes, and I'm getting maximum read speeds on the backplane. But because I'm not worried about the reliability of either of those drives, because we're just reading off of them, we're in pretty good shape. Now, if either of those SSDs dies, I'm going to lose that entire sample drive. Again, is that a big deal? You download them again, you move on. So that's another good way to sort of suck some performance out for less money, because if you were to mirror those and say have them be the exact same data written and read from both drives at any given time, you're only going to get half the performance, right? So anyway, use the spinning drives. The way I would recommend is use the spinning drives for the OS, maybe the programs. Use the mirroring RAID so that you get the reliability, and then use the SSDs in the unreliable performance RAID setup, and you get the benefits without as much of the risks. So that is the software setup. It's just Windows, Vienna, goes straight to it. Now, some other stuff that you will see about these about Vienna setups. You do need a nice router, a good high-performance router. You're not going to want something that is, say, given to you by your ISP. I used to use Comcast Business as my ISP, and I thought that their router that they would give me would be a business-grade router. It's not. Vienna had a lot of pops and cracks with it. It was not good enough. My recommendation, if you need a cheap enterprise-grade router, is this little box. This is a Ubiquiti Edge Router X. This is super cheap. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ports. It's got power over Ethernet. If you're, say, running a access point for your wireless, you can just power it through here, and then you don't need to have like a power supply up there at your actual wireless access point. My access point is actually in the ceiling of a closet down on that side of the house, and it's just a Ethernet wire that hangs out of the ceiling, and the power over Ethernet powers it, which is really nice. Do not try to run Vienna over wireless, by the way. It is not reliable enough. Vienna is very sensitive to packet loss. It's very sensitive to network jitter, so you want to have a copper wire physically running to your sample servers. Another option, if you want something a little bit higher end and a little bit cheaper, this is the Ubiquiti Edge Router PoE. It's just a little bit nicer. I think this one's rated at 1 million packets per second. And it's got the same router software. They all have the same, can't remember what it's called. It's called like Edge OS or something. This is a little bit nicer. It's got a few more ports. It's a little bit more enterprisey. What you saw down there on the video was the Edge router. I don't remember. That one is a future proofing. You do not need one that big yet. The only reason I bought that is I think eventually what I'm going to have is two 2 setups down there. And I want to run some fiber, so it has like an SFP port, and that's like ridiculously expensive. You do not need to buy that right now. You do not need to worry about it. Worry about that when you're scoring, your AAA film, and hire someone. Don't do what I do. I used to work in IT. I know enough to be dangerous, so that's what I do. Anything else about those sample servers? I guess just know that you're going to have to obviously install the samples and contact and samplers and all that stuff on your sample drive, so be ready to do that. But yeah, I mean, this is an amazing deal. This is just an amazing deal. I mean, for example, if I let's go to Puget Systems, and let's try to configure a server that has dual core Xeons. So this is their server, Summit. We'll just grab the little one. You can see I've looked at them before. So right now we're at $3,533, and what we have is a 2x 1.8 gigahertz. By the way, these are 2.39 gigahertz. They go up to 3 gigahertz. 8 cores. So they have more cores. Their turbo speed boost is a little bit faster, but their resting speed is a little bit lower. Let's put 96 gig of RAM in this guy. $4,000. $4,000. Let's put a 1 terabyte. That's the cheapest drive we can put in it. I mean, I guess we could maybe try to get them to take the drive out, which is going to drop it by a couple $100. No other drives. Yeah, I mean, it's got a nice power supply, dual power supply. I mean, it's the same thing. It does not come with. You guess you can have Windows Pro put on it. Again, $4,000, $4,500. Versus if I max this guy out the way I did, less than $1,000. So again, this server that we're configuring over here, this $4,000 one, much nicer, much newer, probably a lot more future-proofed. Probably not going to be $4,000 in 5 years. Probably going to be maybe $1,000, maybe $2,000. I'll buy it then. For now, I'm just going to keep using these hexa-core Dell R610s because, the CPU is not the limiting factor on your samples. I have not personally been able to max it out yet. JunkieXL says that he runs thousands of contact instances per one of these. So, I mean, that's a pretty great. Again, dollar per instance is kind of what you got to think about. Like how many dollars do I spend per contact instance? Right now, if I were to put 1,000 on here, I'd spend $1,000 on it. Maybe a little more because you got to buy those SSDs. Those are actually going to probably almost double the price here. Which again, yeah, but you have 4 terabytes of SSD space. So I would say, as you're looking to expand your studio, as you're looking to do this, I would think about my SSDs being a place where I'm going to dump money. I would think about RAM being a place where I can dump money, and then worry about CPU later, because it seems like, even 10-year-old Xeons are able to do a lot. So anyway, that's my setup. That's my that's how I've got it. Again, just to summarize, things to think about as you are thinking about if you're thinking about buying these. Keep in mind that they're going to be noisy. You cannot keep them in your studio. I could not run them in this room with me. They're way too loud. So you're going to have to either drill a hole in the wall, or if you're fortunate like me, this happens to be a newer home, has some Ethernet in the walls already. Maybe your studio's in like a commercial building. Great. They are going to use a little bit more power. I've been running them for a couple of months. I haven't seen a huge jump in my electricity bill, but then again, I'm only running the one. I've just now getting it finally set up. 3, you're going to have to know what you're doing. You're going to have to be able to set up a RAID array. So if you're not used to setting up a RAID array, maybe go on YouTube, look up some videos on how Dell server BIOS, how you set up RAID arrays. I mean, I can do a video on that if that's something people are interested in. But you're going to have to know how to do that. And you're going to have to buy an operating system and Vienna to make it work. So, this price probably doubles by the time you've added all that, maybe a little bit more. I mean, I probably ended up spending maybe $4,000 total on 2 servers, plus all the software and everything I'm going to need is probably going to end up being about $4,000, which is a lot of money. Again, that's less than one of these. And this again does not come with Vienna, does not come with software, does not come with anything. So to the extent possible, if you can leverage these old servers, I really do think it's a great thing to do. And we should all be thanking Junkie XL for putting that video out, because it's pretty cool. So anyway, I will see everybody later. Hope this was helpful. I guess I should tell you to comment with any questions down below. Sure, great, cool. If you have any questions, I can. If you want to see a video about how you configure the BIOS in these and what it looks like, I can show you that. It's a little tricky. I'd also be happy to do another walkthrough the hardware or whatever you want. Whatever questions you have, let me know. And yeah, hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully it's, because like I said, I bought these, I got them in, and immediately I was like, oh my gosh, what kind of operating system, what kind of drives, what do you want to do? This is what I found. Regular consumer SSDs, maybe buy a couple of these with it because they're pretty cheap to install operating systems and stuff. But other than that, Windows 10 Pro, do not put Windows 10 Home on these. Please buy Pro. You're not going to want to deal with the stuff that comes with Home. Buy Windows 10 Pro. That's it. Have a great day.